Hello, everybody, and welcome to another one of my campaign diaries for the Heroes of the Sanction campaign that I am running in Collabris. We played last Saturday. It was a slightly shorter session, but we still got a reasonable amount done. And I figured, I'm gonna do exactly what I did last week. I'm gonna go through what happened, and I will say, what happened, what they did, the choices that they made, and then afterwards I will go back and I will analyze the way I did things, and I will make decisions on what I think went well and what I think didn't go so well. First of all, though, for those of you who are unaware or didn't watch the first one, I suggest you go do that first, but if you don't have time or you don't care, that's also fine, you can do that. So I will give you a very, very brief recap in the form of this party of adventurers, including Dandelion, a Mousefolk rogue, Moldahl, a human Paragon, Aerynthana, a high elf Vigilante, Gyro, a Dragonborn Paladin, Mox, a Kobold Cleric, and Althaea, a half-elf Sorceress. They have recently escaped the capture of a group of Burnt Hills bandits. Bandits who split away from the nation of Haldrim many years ago after their alliance with the orcs. Well, kind of pissed off a lot of people, and we're very happy about that. So I don't like orcs, because, well, a lot of reasons. But these Burnt Hills bandits, a group of 8 bandits who all have basically split off and sought to give the characters to an individual called Calorel. The characters have since left. We sort of ended as they were then leaving, and they walked off into the wilderness for a couple hours, sort of rested up, and they got their second level stuff. Most of the characters Mox is a cleric, he got his channel divinities. Althea got a new spell and font of magic. Althea's new spell I think she took was Thunderwave, and Thunderwave is really, really strong in conjunction with some of Mox's abilities, which I'll talk about later on. Moldahl, as a Paragon, gets access to his Nerve, which is a thing that Paragons have, which is a little bit like Monk's Key, except there is less of it, but it regenerates better, which he can use to make retaliating attacks and to increase his AC and stuff like that. And he's like a fencer, basically, is what the Paragon kind of is. Gyro, being now a second-level Paladin, has access to a fighting style. I let him take 2-weapon fighting, even though Paladins generally don't have it. I figured, why not? It's a fighting style. It doesn't really make that much of a difference if I give one of the fighting styles to him that he otherwise wouldn't be able to have. They're all loosely the same in power, except protection, which sucks. So, there's no harm in him having 2-weapon fighting. Plus, Paladin with 2 weapons is cool. Dandelion, as a second-level rogue, of course, gets her cunning action. And that is about it for rogue-wise. It's all really rogues get at second level, but cunning action is really strong, so, And finally, Aeryn, as a Vigilante, gets access to signature weapons, in which she can pick a ranged and melee weapon. She picked the weapons that she has, a longbow and a rapier, and she can choose to reroll 1s and 2s on her damage dice with those signature weapons, which is really, really useful. She also got access to my own custom feature, which I added to the Vigilante, called Sleuth Senses, which she can pick 2 Sleuth Senses from a list of about 11 or 12, and she gets some more as she levels up. I think she gets a maximum of 6 by the time she gets to 17th level. And they're basically situations where you can expend a use of your Vigilante's Mark of Vengeance to gain advantage on a specific skill when used in a specific way for about an hour. I forget which ones she took, but I know one of them, and one of them became very useful, is Wild Walker, which, for an hour, you gain advantage on Wisdom survival checks to not become lost in a fully natural environment, which proved to be extremely useful as the party are in woodland hills with no, rocky woodland hills with no real reference of where they are outside of knowing they're in the Burnt Hills. But the characters rest up. I believe Mox and Aeryn took a watch. They encountered very little, and then the characters moved on the road. And of course, Collabris, being a hex map, I decided to employ the... I have my own personal map of the Northern Sanction, which I will either put on screen now or put in the description of this video, which you can go have a look at. And it is a 1 hex to 1 day's travel map. And the characters really just, they had no means of knowing where they were going, but Aeryn led the group on the first day of major travel, and she managed to sort of guide them down the hillside, sort of into a more heavy forested area. And that was pretty much their first day of travel. They encountered very little outside of wildlife. Dandelion, during the morning, used her Mousefolk ability that is very similar to the Forest Gnome's ability to communicate simple ideas with small and tiny beasts. She basically found a hare, which she asked, where's the nearest, big encampment of humans? And the rabbit basically pointed to what turned out to be the north, and they headed in that general direction. And that was pretty much all that happened on the first day. The next day, once again, is a very uneventful day of travel, and they sort of midway through came to a clearing, because Aeryn rolled really, really high thanks to her sleuth sense. She rolled really high on her survival. I had her notice a pair of boot tracks, an individual with heeled traveling boots. The characters all hid behind trees to varying degrees of success, and they reached this clearing that's sort of sneaking around, and they saw a woman picking berries from a tree. And they all sort of came up with a plan that the more intimidating bunch of them, i.e. all of them except Dandelion, were going to hide, and Dandelion was going to step out into the clearing and basically just act nonchalantly, and find out who this woman was. They did that. Some of them rolled very well for stealth, some of them did not. This woman notices Dandelion as she just walks out, and immediately spins around and performs sort of an arcane gesture with her hands, and lightning crackles between her fingers. And this just kind of frightens Dandelion a little bit, but she basically had, it's like, who are you? What are you doing here? Dandelion's basically, I'm just here to pick some berries, need some rations. And the woman then goes, well, you don't want to eat these berries. They are very poisonous. And she's like, oh, okay, then why are you picking them? She goes, alchemy. And this, of course, raises the suspicion of the players. And I have Moldahl, who is proficient in alchemist supplies. I have him roll an intelligence check, adding his proficiency bonus, because he's likely to know about this. And I basically told him that these are bloodberries, and they can be used both as fairly nasty poison and also as an enhancer in a healing potion. So they're sort of ingredients of like greater and superior and supreme healing potions. And she basically says, however many friends you have hidden, I could see at least 2 of them, the rest of you come out. Because there are 2, both Mox and Gyro, the lizards in the party, are wearing heavy armor and thus have disadvantage on stealth checks, and neither of them have particularly good dex. I know Mox's is okay, and Gyro's is maybe +0, so yeah, they're at a distinct disadvantage. But all of them reveal themselves except Aeryn, who says, I stay hidden, I have my bow drawn and an arrow knocked, ready to shoot her if things go bad. And Aeryn rolled very high for stealth, so I decided this woman didn't notice her. This woman introduces herself as Mira. She is a witch that lives in Haldrim. And I then had Althaea roll to see if she recognized this woman, as Althaea is from Grey's Keep, the capital of Haldrim. She rolled very poorly because she's not got a particularly high intelligence score. I think it's only like 10 or 11. And then Dermot says, would I know who this woman is? And this is something that Dermot does a lot. He's a bit of a role piggybacker, but not he's not one of those people that'll push it. He'll always ask if he can make a roll as well, but he won't push you if you tell him no, which I think is a perfectly reasonable trait to have. And I told him, well, with Moldahl having a noble background, sure. He rolled in the 20s. I think he was like a 23 or a 24. He's a noble. He's proficient in history. He has +3 intelligence. He rolled really, really well. And I basically told him, you have met this woman once before at a ball. You met very fleetingly as your fathers conversed. This is Princess Miranda of Haldrim. And the table goes in uproar, and anyone who knows anything about Collabris, which none of the players do, but people at home may well do, is that Miranda is second in line to the throne. I explained this to Dermot. that Miranda is a witch. She is second in line to the throne. Her sister Elise is to be queen when their extremely old father, Cyric the Grey, passes on. I've decided that in the... Because Matt never specified how old Cyric was, and even if he has, I probably would have changed it anyway, but I specified that Cyric is 91 years of age. So, even by today's standard, Cyric would be an old-ass man, but in old-timey times, that is an old man. And his daughters are like, in their late 30s. Elise has kids of her own. Miranda is unmarried and has no children, but she... Moldahl, they speak with Miranda, and Moldahl says, yes, princess, and she is very quick, she gets very defensive immediately, and then sort of says right, well, I best be going, and disappears, and I sort of ad-libbed it just for effect. I basically had her cast Teleportation Circle, but kind of shortened the cast time to an action, so it looked a lot cooler, as opposed to her just faffing around for 10 minutes and then leaving. But she did, however, leave them with a map of the Northern Sanction, with just written, you'll need this more than I do, and she kind of left that behind. So they now have a map, and I thought it was important for me to give them a map early on, especially as this is a lot more hex-crawly than anything I've ever run before, so I think giving the players a fairly accurate map very early on is a good idea. And especially since the princess gave it to them, it's probably of reasonable quality from a skilled cartographer, so it's not going to be inaccurate. But it's also not going to have anything outside of major landmarks on it. It just has all the important things in the Sanction. She also, prior to this, had directed the characters to a hunting trail to the north, which is about a day's travel, which will take them out to the road, which leads between the crossroads and Lane. The characters, but before she goes, sort of give her a brief thanks, and they take a look at the map, and I believe Dandelion has it now. She has the map, and they begin to traverse north. I basically shortened down the next bit of travel time. I really should have rolled for random encounters. I think I was rolling behind the screen for it, but I never actually deployed any out of choice. I'll get into that a little bit later, but the characters traveled for, I think, the better part of about 5 days until they eventually got to this road. And it is a largely deserted road that leads between the village of Lane to the south, which I think is, in the base map, it's called Traunch, but I really was not a fan of the name, so I changed it. Plus, keeping it similar to the name of the town from against the cult of the reptile god, Orlane, so I could accidentally call it Orlane, and no one would think anything weird of it if I misnamed the town. The characters were basically like, do we want to go north, or do we want to go south? And they almost unanimously agreed, let's go north to the crossroads, because Althaea knows that there is an inn there. She doesn't know what it's called, but she knows it's there, and they head north. Over the course of about 2 days' travel, they encounter literally nobody. There is no one on the road, very little wildlife. It's very out of the ordinary, and both the characters and the players are very unnerved by this. Understandably, it is set later on in the year, and I explained to them that it is getting towards winter time, but even so, you should have at least seen like a couple people in the 3 days you've been traveling. But they don't see anyone, and I kind of shortened the travel time a little bit. And by the time they eventually reached this inn, they had almost run out of rations, actually. Aeryn, with her 4 strength, we had to take rations out of her inventory so she could actually carry what she had. So, she had such a small carry weight that she couldn't actually really carry anything more than like 6 days of rations. She was completely out by the time the travel time was over. Luckily, the characters are quite good at foraging, and they're in an area where food is very plentiful. They spend a lot of time in the wilderness. There was plenty of time and place to forage. But eventually, they get to an inn, which they can see in a valley, and I will read the little flavor text that I wrote for this part of their quest. As you crest a small hill, you see a small valley laid before you, at the center of which is the intersection of this road with the ancient cobbled byway of an empire long dead. Marking such an intersection is a large inn, 3 stories tall with an ample patch of farmland behind it, a stable big enough to house a dozen steeds, and a sizable pond fed by the running waters to the north. As you move down into this valley towards said intersection, you see what at first appears to be a boulder as big as a man, but as you draw closer, it reveals itself to be a giant stone statue of a toad that gazes with a tired expression towards the pond to the north. The inn is even larger up close, but much quieter than you were expecting, with no real noise coming from inside, outside of the occasional low muttering. A large sign hangs out front, with a sleeping frog adorning it. The Lazy Frog, written in chipped letters. And that was the flavor text that I presented the players with, and this was a little unnerving to them, sort of hearing that it was empty, but it was a little sort of lighthearted a bit by the frog statue outside. Calling this inn the Lazy Frog was actually not my idea. This is the idea of Lauren, a player in one of my other games, and I was basically stumped for good in-name ideas, and I sent a message to a little group chat that I have, and I basically said, someone give me a good in-name idea, I can't think of anything, and then within 2 seconds, the Lazy Frog, and I was like, nope, that's perfect, I am using that. That is just the right amount of stupid. I love it. And the characters head inside, and the very few people in this otherwise would be, like, very spacious inn. Like, this inn has, its tavern floor has enough space to house some 50, 60 people, but there's only like 9 or 10 in here. And one of them being the barkeep. And I basically describe all the people in this room. There is 2 traveling women who are sat together, one of them quite short, one of them quite tall. There is a man in a hood with a pencil moustache. There is a rather smartly dressed man in an overcoat with a beard. And there is a dwarven man sat at the end of the bar, bearing himself in a drink. And sat on a table further away are 4 very rough and tumble-looking individuals who give eyes to the characters quite often. The barkeep is a rather rotund man with sideburns and a beard, and he is very jittery, very frightened. He never looks the players in the eye. He says the food and drinks are on the house, but no rooms. For those of you who are familiar with Matt Colville's work, you will find this scene very familiar, and for that reason, you are right. I wanted to emulate this exact scene, and you all know what's coming, because it's a good scene, and I wanted to use it. I've always wanted to, and now I'm getting to, and I'm very, very happy with how it turned out. As the characters are getting their drinks and Dandelion is off getting a table, Aeryn notices, with her pretty decent perception, I think it was Rose actively asked to sort of look around and see what was going on around her. And she saw that the head of this group of rough individuals, this rather burly man, is eyeing Moldahl, staring at the back of his head, looking between him and a piece of paper, which as soon as he notices Aeryn looking at him, he crumples up and puts in his pocket. As the characters then go and sit down, they sort of sit around for a little while, and eventually this large individual lumbers over and begins to talk to Moldahl, saying that there is a price on his head, and that, well, they're here to exact that price. These bounty hunters are very cocky. They think they have the upper hand on all the characters, and immediately Olly dives into character and has Gyro stand up and pretend to speak to the man. He goes over and talks to him and asks him about the details of the job, sort of pulling him aside, and this man basically offers Gyro the chance to help for a cut of the 10,000 gold on Moldahl's head. And 10,000 gold, that's a lot of money. Gyro knows that, even though he's not from here, and they use a different currency in Zir anyway, but he knows that 10,000, that is a lot of money for one man he barely knows. And he sort of plays along for a little while and says, yeah, sure. And they sort of go back over, and they bring Moldahl outside. Moldahl kind of is reluctantly going along with this. He's not really sure what's happening, and is kind of going with it because he wants to know what's going on. The characters wait inside whilst the innkeep is looking terrified. They go outside, and Gyro... I basically had Gyro roll a deception check, and he rolled quite well. And they got outside, and the man goes to start speaking to Moldahl and starts threatening him, and immediately Olly goes for acid breath. And we start surprise round. And this surprise round is completely devastating for them. Every single one of these bounty hunters, with the exception of their leader, is killed within the surprise round by a combination of an excellent strategy deployed by Mox's Channel Divinity Orders Command. He charms a creature until the start of his next turn, or until that creature takes damage. The creature drops their weapons. Althaea then ran outside and cast Thunderwave. It didn't matter that most of the characters, their enemies, succeeded, but all of their weapons were blown 10 feet away, meaning that even if they wanted to go pick up their weapons at the start of their next turn, they can't because they're 10 feet away. The characters with combination of Aeryn's arrows, Dandelion's insane damage from her sneak attack, and a whole variety of other things involving Moldahl's ability to deal lots of damage, Gyro's 2 attacks with his 2-weapon fighting. It was a very, very dangerous encounter, reduced to basically nothing by a surprise round. And they managed to keep the last guy alive. They knocked him unconscious, and Moldahl managed to manacle him with his manacles. Moldahl's liking the manacles. I think that should be... Well, there's certainly interesting things going on with Moldahl and his manacles. So, I'm very happy to give Dermot the opportunity to show some of the newer players some of the more out there stuff you can do other than just attacking stuff. Because when he succeeds, he's very, very successful. And this sort of combat is over, and they get ready to get this guy, and almost immediately, coming around the corner from beside the tavern, is a wagon pulled by 2 gaunt, grey-skinned figures. It's less of a wagon and more of a carriage, a very fine carriage at that. And then stepping out onto the dirt is a man with chalk white skin, sunken cheeks, and long white hair. He has black, sort of plated armor, almost chitinous in the way of its design, and a pair of sort of prongs that come out from his shoulders that form almost like horns that come out from his shoulder blades. He comes out and hovers across the ground, and has the 2 ghouls on the back of his, that are driving his carriage, driven by skeletal horses, jump off and start to drag the bodies to the back of the carriage. The characters look very surprised, and none of them challenge him. Moldahl and Gyro ask questions. They begin to quiz him on who he is, and Dandelion starts crying. I feel like this is very, very amusing, very in character for Dandelion. Dandelion isn't a coward by any means, but she is scared of scary people. Mox, being a kobold, who is naturally quite cowardly, is attempting to console Dandelion whilst also trying not to lose his shit himself. This man, who the characters, well, they have no idea who he is. See, the man that is alive, I believe it was Moldahl pointed out, oh yeah, he's still alive, and the man sort of holds 3 fingers forward, and he drains the life from the unconscious leader of the bounty hunters, and he turns into a husk. Moldahl then sort of, hey, can I have his coat? He has something I need. And the man just waves, and the coat flies off his body into Moldahl's hands. And Moldahl's now wearing this coat, by the way. He's also found all of the wanted posters inside, which I will also put in the description. I sent that to all the players as sort of a handout after the session, because I didn't actually have it in my notes, so I sent it to them afterwards. I made the rest of them. And this man introduces himself only when prompted. He doesn't really talk to the characters unless they talk directly to him. He otherwise just ignores them. He calls himself Calorel. He then, as the innkeeper's kind of watching from the door, he kind of uses some kind of coercion to pull the innkeep towards him. Not physically pull him, even with magic, more sort of through enchantments and mind control, as the innkeep fights his own will to move towards Calorel. And he holds out his hand, and again, I'm sure many of you are familiar, he receives 3 pieces of red gold. Then, well, he basically bids them all farewell and gets into his carriage, and it drives off. Drives back around the corner and just disappears. The characters are very confused. Dandelion and Mox are terrified, and they go back inside and begin to question people on what the hell just happened. And no one seems to have any idea what's going on. The innkeep says that this guy just turned up. He appears whenever anyone dies, and he keeps giving people this gold. The characters ask for the gold, or some of the gold, and he gives it to them. He gives them the 3 pieces of gold he just got. And the characters now have some of Calorel's red gold. They have discerned through Mox's ritual casting of Detect Magic that it contains some conjuration and divination magic, but they don't have any means of knowing what that is because none of them have access to identify. They basically finished up the session by the characters deciding amongst themselves that they are going to go to the capital, Grey's Keep, as Dandelion has business there anyway that the characters don't know about, but she's mentioned several times, and it's probably their best bet for finding out what the hell is going on. Maybe they can even speak to Princess Miranda, who they met this session, and ask her about what's going on. And that is pretty much all that happened this week. I know that took a lot longer than I was expecting it to, but I'm kind of happy with the way that I narrated it. I feel like I'm getting into the swing of this a lot more. But there's not a lot of commentary for me to give this week outside of the following, really, is that I should have had encounters on the road. We overran a little bit again today, and we wouldn't have gotten to the cool Calorel stuff if I had, but I still wish I had to maintain that feeling that the world is dangerous. And the reason I didn't do it is because I didn't have enough tokens. I have these little wooden tokens that I use instead of miniatures, because miniatures are expensive, and I don't have money for that. I will find a link to the post, because it's really, really good. I'll put it in the description. You can use, I have some substitutes. You buy some little wooden discs on Amazon or somewhere like that, and you print out things and you prime them with like nail varnish or a similar primer, and then you can use special glue to glue them to wooden discs, and they become really, really like low budget but actually like high quality little tokens. They're really, really good. I highly suggest you go check it out. It may be something you'd be interested in doing. But I didn't have the tokens. I didn't have enough of the wooden discs to make tokens for the random encounters that I wanted, so I just didn't run any. And I realized in hindsight that was really dumb. I should have just done it and just said I don't have tokens for this, because I don't even have tokens for the main characters because there's not art for most of them yet, with the exception of Dandelion. But that still, for some reason, held me back from running an encounter, which is really stupid. I shouldn't have done that, and I should have run a random encounter, and I'll definitely start doing that again in future, because I really need to start doing it. As for the fight with the bounty hunters, I either should have buffed the bounty hunters, or I should have not given them surprise round, or just not made them so goddamn easy to trick. I think that was sort of a lack of, like, not really knowing what was going on between me and Olly. Like, I wasn't sure exactly what he was doing. For a while, I thought he was genuinely siding with the bounty hunters for quite some time, until he, like, illicitly said he wasn't doing that. It wasn't very clear, so I wasn't 100% sure on what he was doing. I got a little confused, and it ended up that the combat was really short and extremely easy. Mostly down to surprise round, but even so, if it hadn't been, I really should have buffed those guys some more. I need to gear some of my combat to be a lot more challenging in future. When they're on their journey to Grey's Keep, I do not plan on it being so easy. But that is pretty much all that happened this week. We will be playing again. I think by the time this goes up, we will already have played again. I'm going to try and get into the swing of actually doing these more consistently. And once Alice has all the art done, she's currently working on art for Aeryn, and I know Olly is getting sort of like a base and description done for his character soon, or for Gyro quite soon, so Alice will have some of that. But it's just a case of waiting for the art to get done, because you can't art takes time, and also people need to provide bases for Alice to actually work from, bases and mood boards and stuff like that. But that is that for this week's campaign diary. I hope you found it interesting. If you did, there's some buttons under this video. Everybody on YouTube tells you what they are. You know what they all do. If you don't, go watch any other YouTube video. Like, seriously, they'll tell you at the end or halfway through. But you press them if you want. You don't have to. I am the boss. You do what you want. And if you want to support me, I have a product on the DMs Guild, which you can find in the social below. You can find it on my Twitter or on the Jock Tumblr, on the Jock blog. It is the Archive of Esoteric Secrets. It is 160 spells for 5th edition. It's sold really, really well. I'm super happy with how it's turned out. If you want to go take a look at it, you can get basically exactly half the book for free on the DM's Guild to sort of see whether you like it, and you can get the full thing with the art and the even better spells that are in there, because the first half, mostly down to just the order in which I made them, and I got a lot better at making spells as I made it, but the second half is even better than the first, because of all crazy spells like Hyperborean Star and Jackdaw's Murderous Murders and Snillock's Supernatural Snowman and other, spells of varying degrees of ridiculous or awesomeness. If you want to go take a look at it, you can find it either on my Twitter or on the Jock blog. It's really easy to find. It's or you can just search the complete Archive of Esoteric Secrets. It'll turn up. If you want to go take a look at it, please do. You don't have to. I am the boss. You do what you want with your time and your money, but it's there if you care. But that is it for this week. I hope you have enjoyed this campaign diary. We will definitely be playing next week. As I am recording this on Thursday, we will be playing this Saturday. I need to finish preparing Grey's Keep later on today, actually. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I will see you next week.